Want to welcome everybody back to another installment of Buford Pusser, The Other Story. This is episode 10, and we're going to discuss the trial of Buford Pusser in regards to the robbery and assault with the intent to murder W.O. Hathcock. And with me is Dennis Hathcock, W.O.'s son. In the last episode, we talked about the robbery itself, how all three of these men, Pusser, Wright, and King, came down from Chicago on January 4th, December 13th, robbed the Plantation Club, and how that they were arrested on a warrant that was issued by Buck Sorrell, Justice of the Peace in Alcorn County. They were transported back to Corinth to stand trial by Sheriff Hilly Coleman. Now, in the movie Walking Tall, now I will say, and I think everybody will agree with me, that it was a very fascinating movie. Action-packed, lots of fun to watch, so on and so forth, but the thing just wasn't true. For instance, in the part that we're going to talk about today, in regards to the trial, the movie had the trial taking place in McNairy County, which is totally false. The crime occurred in Alcorn County, Mississippi. That's where the trial was held, there at the courthouse in Corinth. In the movie, they also have a scene where Buford is really going off about their bond being set at $50,000, saying, they didn't even require that much of a bond for first-degree murder. Well, actually, the bond was set at $7,500, $4,000 for the robbery charge, and $3,500 for attempting to kill W.O., which I find kind of strange that somehow the state valued the robbery at a higher rate than trying to kill somebody. And something I want to make clear is that the trial occurred was going to occur in two stages. One being the robbery charge, which they tried first, and then there was to be a trial for the assault with the intent to murder. Now, also, in the movie version, it shows that Buford refused any representation legal-wise, when in fact, he was represented by an attorney, Carrie Stovall. They tried to make a point that, in the movie, that Buford only had one day to prepare for trial, which is totally false, because they arrived back in Corinth in early January. The trial didn't start till late January, and of course, they had plenty of time to prepare for the case, I guess I should say. Another thing that got me in the movie was that Buford only had one witness, Ludy McVeigh, and Ludy didn't get to testify because they fished him out of the water. He was dead. In fact, Buford had several witnesses, family and friends, that most of which were from Chicago at that time. So that part of the movie was totally phony. In the movie, it also showed Buford rip his shirt off and tell the jury, chest full of stars, saying, if you let them get away with this, you give them the eternal right to do the same damn thing to any one of you. That never happened. Buford didn't even have a chest full of scars to show anybody. And I'm sure the judge wouldn't have allowed that in the first place, or at least I don't think he would. And then in the movie, it also showed that the jury deliberated for less than 5 minutes before they set Buford free. And that part isn't true, because, they deliberated for a few hours before they took a dinner break, and then they came back and, reached a not guilty verdict. But here, what we want to get into is the kind of blood and guts of the trial itself. Like I say, it was held in Corinth, and Judge Raymond T. Jarvis was the presiding judge. Never any indication that he was ever a crooked judge, that at least that I'm aware of. The prosecuting the case was County Prosecutor NS. They called him Soggy Sweat. Also, they had the county attorney, H.M. Ray, and then W.O. had a personal attorney, and I've never understood this, that assisted with the prosecution. But be that as it may, for the defense, Kerry Stovall represented Buford. And he was assisted by Jimmy Price. Now, like I said earlier, there were two charges, one for robbery, one for assault with the intent to commit murder. And there were three defendants that were actually on trial. Now, something a lot of people aren't aware of is that Buford was able to make bond prior to the trial. George and Clyde King, who I guess sold farm equipment or implements in Corinth, they fronted the bail. So Pussers had to come up with $750, 10% of the total bond that was out there. But Wright and King couldn't come up with the money, so they stayed in jail until the trial. All right, now getting into this, I guess, during the trial, Buford would claim that he, Wright, and King left Chicago around 6 p.m. on December 12th. And their story was that they were going to visit a friend in Anna, Illinois. Now, Anna is about 360 miles, more or less southwest of Chicago. I find it kind of strange that they planned this trip. They're going to drive round trip 720 miles. And yet when they allegedly arrive at this friend's residence, no one's at home. And so their story was they turned around and went back to Chicago and got there about 10 a.m. the next morning. Pusser and Wright had been down to the Plantation Club mid-October when they were on vacation. That came out in the trial, and of course, I'm sure it probably raised some eyebrows. Now, W.O. said that on the morning of the robbery, which was, again, December 13th, that the three of those men arrived and took seats in the dance hall area of the club. A little bit later, they moved to the bar area. Now, as the bar had cleared out, W.O. would testify that they went to the bar area as the club closed down. Just the three of them, W.O. left in the club. W.O. sold them a little handgun for $25. And, he was trying to get them out of the club. And Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong here. To do so, one of the things he did was he walked across the dance floor down to the jukebox, unplugged it, and to try and usher them out. Right. As he walked back to the bar area was when he said that he was struck in the head and lost consciousness. But the last thing he saw was Pusser at the bar, and Wright was at the bar, but King was nowhere to be seen. Now, he was rendered unconscious by the blow to the head. And when he came to, he had been hogtied using a cord that was from a ceiling light, a little drawstring, if you will. And that after he got himself unbound, he made his way up to the steps of the living quarters. Now, Larice had already gone to bed, and the family dog kind of alerted Larice to the fact that something had happened out there. And when she opened the door, she found W.O. on the steps of the living quarters. She took him to the hospital. Now, Larice herself testified that she saw the three men come in about 3 a.m. And she also stated that she recognized Pusser and Wright, but she didn't know who King was. And she testified that she had retired to the living quarters shortly after that, so she had no knowledge of what all had gone on out there. But that as soon as she discovered WO, she called Dr. Frank Davis, and she took WO to the hospital. Now, also testifying for WO was Billie Jean Robinson, and he identified all three men as entering the club before he left. Now, Nita Godwin also testified that she saw the three men arrive and that she recognized Pusser, but she didn't know who Wright and King were. Now, Margaret Wright, Jerry Wright's mother, she would testify that the three men left Chicago around 6 p.m. on December 12th. And, other witnesses would place them being back in Chicago by 10 a.m. the next morning. Now, Sheriff Hildy Coleman also stated that he saw all three defendants in the club. Now, the personnel manager from the Union Bag Company, Elmer St. John, brought their time cards up and testified that they were all punched in all day long, which gave them the ability or the alibi that there was no way that they could have made a 10-hour trip from Chicago down to the state line and back in the time that was stated. So the jury goes out, they deliberate for a few hours, they return with a verdict of not guilty. And with that, being found not guilty on the robbery charge, prosecutors evaluated their situation and said, well, if we couldn't prove that they were even here, how can we prove, if they weren't here to rob the place, that they also assaulted and tried to kill WO? So they ended up dropping the charges on that. Brings us up to some talking points. And Dennis, help me out here, but you're probably more familiar with the travel time between Chicago and the state line than I am. But I find it odd, well, in the first place, that they would travel 360 miles one way to see a friend that they don't even know that's at home.
That's right.
And
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I would have thought that they would have called and said, hey, we're coming down, we're going to see you Friday night, so on and so forth. Didn't happen. So that there was a 16-hour window there at that point where no one could testify on their behalf about their whereabouts. But still yet, everybody's looking at that window that you have 16 hours, but it's 10 hours one way to the state line and 10 hours back. So, they're saying, well, they must be innocent because the time isn't working out. Now, John Pusser, Buford's brother, did testify that he was with them, and he could testify to their whereabouts. However, nobody ever saw John. So, that kind of, to me, puts his testimony in question. The time card defense was suspicious, because while the time cards say one thing, I have to wonder, well, what time, who clocked them in? Did they go to work for half a day? Clock in? And that gave them a lot of extra time to make that drive. Did they even go to work that day? Did they have a friend clock them in? So you have to wonder about all that. So my question is, what if the defendants lied about the time that they left Chicago? Because nobody really can state when they did. If they didn't work all day on Friday, they had plenty of time to get there by 3 a.m. Dennis, do you know anything about their whereabouts? Have you ever heard any conversation about that?
You talking about when they got there?
Yeah.
Before? Jack across the road over there to Shamrock, then they said that they came in over there and then came across the road. So they were over there for a little while. And that's about the only thing I remember ever hearing. Well, I did remember a story that came about that, well, I think I've told about one of the people that helped identify who it was, that they had come by Adamsville and been there earlier that day. And claimed they was down there visiting somebody or something. But like I said,
those stories are true. Then they left a lot earlier than 6 p.m.
Right.
Now, we get back to the testimony that was given by Margaret Wright, Jerry Wright's mom, saying that they left. And, also Pauline Pusser testified that, they left at 6 p.m. But, you have to wonder, would either of them have perjured themselves to protect Margaret, her son, and Pauline, her husband?
I doubt that they would, but the other thing, I'm not sure of this. How long had Pauline and him been married when that happened?
They got married on December 5th, so they'd been married 1 week.
1 week, right.
And, another thing that I find a little strange is that Buford, having been married for only 1 week, would just all of a sudden say, hey, I want to go down to Anna, Illinois and visit a friend this weekend. Find that just a little hard to believe.
Well, wouldn't it be a little bit harder to believe that if he just got married to Pauline for a week, that he would be down there, if it's all true, what they told, that he would be down there, him and two of his buddies, at 3 o'clock in the morning out at a place like the plantation buying pistols? Wouldn't it seem a little strange if you've just been married a week?
I mean, I wouldn't have been doing that, but
right.
It's just strange the way the movie tried to lay this out, that the trial was held in Tennessee, that the judge was crooked, the sheriff was crooked, the only witness was silenced to keep him from testifying. Just a lot of stuff like that. The fact that in the movie they had Buford ripping his shirt off and making a speech toward the jury about, if they do this to me, well, you're giving them the right to do the same thing to you. And how, they said it took less than 5 minutes. Well, I think when we look back at this and we look at the time discrepancies, that, and something else that has always got my attention, March 26th of 1974, Ellie Grossman, she was interviewing Buford, talked to him, and about the 12th of August. And she wrote in the Tuscaloosa News that nowadays Pusser testifies to the book's version, referring to the 12th of August, and saying then he goes on to admit that he and his friends lied to the jury in Mississippi under cover of a prearranged alibi in Chicago. So you know, you've got all these people that were testifying for him, giving questionable information. And then you've got him telling her, yeah, we actually perjured ourselves. And I guess by that time, you know, the movie was out, it was a hit, and he felt untouchable.
Well, she's not the only one that he told that to. It was in the Tennessean too.
Sure. Oh, it was in a lot of places.
Oh, he was bragging about doing it in the Tennessean.
And somehow people miss that.
I wonder that myself.
You know, you were a young man. You were only, what, about 10 years old when the trial occurred?
That's about right.
Did your parents or grandparents ever say anything to you about the trial, tell you anything about it?
Well, they talked about it, but they, you know, I eavesdropped and listened, but they weren't telling me everything that was going on. But I've had some people that were at the trial to tell me about some things that went on at it, but I wasn't there, so I don't know.
You know, after the trial and after Buford was elected sheriff, and of course he'd killed your Aunt Louise at the Shamrock, your dad and Howard Bunch ended up buying those state line properties. Right. And, you know, they did it because the IRS had a lien on the properties where Jack had failed to pay property taxes for several years and owed about $120,000. And, you know, when he was killed, that left Louise with that debt. And it appeared that the IRS was going to take the property, and that's when Buford killed her just right before that they took the property. And he allegedly went in and looked for any money that they had hidden away. But I guess the point I'm getting to here is, now if W.O. was so afraid of Buford as Buford would have everybody believe, why would he buy be involved in buying the Shamrock, and with part of it being in McNairy County where Buford had jurisdiction?
Well, about Daddy being afraid of Buford, I can assure you that is not true. I don't know about Pusser being afraid of him. I'd say it might have been a little bit more that way, but no, Daddy, I mean, Daddy and him ran into each other several times, and he'd talk about seeing him. Of course, he'd wouldn't have good things to say about him, but
well, I know that you know, and we'll get into this in another episode a little bit later, but you know, sometime after W.O. bought the Shamrock along with Howard Bunch, W.O. and Junior Smith got into a little gunplay, and it was over in Buford's jurisdiction. He had to come down and investigate. You know, he didn't arrest W.O., didn't do anything with him to speak of, never had any problems with him down there at the state line while that they operated the properties. And so it's kind of like, for all of his bravado, he left W.O. alone.
Right.
That's
exactly, I mean, I don't know what to say there. I mean,
now, as a kid, with you knowing a lot of what's going on, the history that the Hathcocks in general and Pusser had, did you ever worry about your mom and dad?
Oh, yeah, no question. Yeah, I did a lot. Of course, they worried about me too, but
oh, I'm sure. Well, something we'll cover as we get on down the road in the story. Allegedly, well, I say allegedly, you know for a fact, your house was shot up, and
Not dad, mother and daddy's house, not mine. But
well, yeah. Your mom and dad's house was shot up, and tell us about your portrait that they had hanging on the wall.
Oh, they had a big portrait. It was a big portrait they had made of me when I was about, I guess, about 7 years, 7 years old, something. I was sitting on a little stool, and had a little suit on and everything. And one of the bullets that came through the house went just as center in my head right there in that portrait as it could. Oh, and mother especially, she just, that's all they could talk about. That's how, and of course, then cuss Pusser because it's pretty obvious who was doing the shooting. He'd brag about it and all that, but
But as far as ever being charged with it or anything like that, he never was.
No.
So could have been anybody, but he was the best suspect, I guess.
Best suspect, right?
Do you have any other comments that you'd like to make? I've done most of the talking here.
Well, not really. Not about that trial, because, like I said, I was young and I really can't tell a whole lot about it because I wasn't there. Only thing I know is what I heard from my side of the family, and it's just exactly what you've been talking about. You've pretty well told it like it was, and it's a different story than what we saw in Walking Tall. Is the whole that point. I will say something about. I can assure you, it was completely different than what Walking Tall showed.
Well, that being the case, I'll mention my book. Cover that along with everything else that. Well, let me restate that. I cover that along with a lot of other things I know about what went on. There's a lot of things I can't tell yet that happened, but that's part of the process of learning. People tell you things, and some of it you just can't reveal, at least not at this time. Now, the next episode, we're going to get into the fact about Buford returning to Adamsville, how he got his job as a patrolman initially there in Adamsville, how that his dad wrangled a way for him to become chief of police. That led into him being a constable and eventually into running for sheriff. And a lot of interesting things a lot of people don't know. So looking forward to sharing all that. Right now, I guess we ought to end this thing. I want to tell everybody thanks for watching this. I'd like for you to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll know whenever a new installment comes out. We also have the Facebook page where we cover this and a lot of other things. I'd like for everybody to follow me on that page. Dennis, I want to say thanks for being here again.
Thank you.
We'll have you back in a while, probably be when we get around to the ambush, because you did play a big part in that. Yeah. Not the ambush itself, but finding some of the evidence.
Right. No. Another thing about the trial, why I think part of the reason that they threw it out of court, just the sentiments of the people, the local people, because, back then a nightclub and people drinking and everything, that it wasn't like today.
Right.
And so the churches was.
And the South was a big part of the Bible Belt, and Corinth was near the buckle.
Right. And, like I've told a lot of people, a lot of the guys that go out there and drink and lose their money or give it to women and all that kind of stuff, and then go home and tell that they got robbed there and this happened and that happened, and that, I'm not saying that occasionally some woman might not take the money off of some guy that's drunk, but that goes on every day, everywhere in the world. And it just, being in the Bible Belt and it happening, that's all it amounts to is wine.
Yeah, something else I forgot to mention before we leave is that that was not the biggest case that occurred that month. They had a case that went on where a young black boy was murdered, and they had a big trial over that. It involved a lot of things. There was a number of kids that were involved, all of them about 15, 16 years old. It was on Halloween night, and how that the jury had been tampered with. And when you go back and you look at cases that occurred in January, that was the big case. And you didn't hear that much about the Plantation Club robbery.
No.
So I found that kind of interesting. And
I'm gonna tell this. I never heard Daddy tell it, but I heard somebody that was a good friend of his at the time and that was at the trial and all that did. So they were real close friends. Tell that Buford's daddy, Carl, was trying to see how much money he could pay to get him to drop it.
Yeah.
On his son, on Buford. So, like I said, I don't know that that's true. I'm just throwing that in there.
A lot of stories out there. And unfortunately, a lot of them we'll never be able to get down to the bottom of.
Right.
But that may have been the case.
May have been. Back in those days, money talked. It does today, but it was.
Yeah, I found it strange that Carl went down and got Buford bonded out, but the other two were still in jail.
Right.
So, at any rate, well, that being said, again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, visit our page on Facebook. Again, it's Buford Pusser, The Other Story. Dennis, thanks for being here. And as I always end these things, just remember that the truth has no agenda. So we'll see you next time.
Hey, thank you.
You bet. Thanks for being here.